Thank you for listening to this special edition episode of the Boise State football schedule prediction with Nick Hall and Collin Mitchell. Be sure to let us know your thoughts on Twitter, YouTube, and WordPress. So we got Collin Mitchell and Nicholas Hall here. We're filming a podcast just doing Boise State football, just going over their schedule. We got an 8-week schedule in the Mountain West that starting next Saturday. Definitely looking forward to that. So week 1, technically week 8, we have a home game against Utah State. What do you think about that, Nick?
So I think this one's interesting because it's a home game, and I don't know whether or not Boise State has announced anything regarding fans. So that might be something to keep an eye on as it gets further along.
So to start, I think they said just no fans for the first game, but I don't know about anything after that. That definitely will be an interesting topic.
But as far as the game goes, I'm not worried about Utah State as much. Basically, simply because of the quarterback situation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, considering they lost Jordan Love, who was, I believe, a first-round draft pick, that's a huge loss. And Boise State, honestly, has really struggled against quarterbacks of that caliber. Last year they didn't when they played Jordan Love, but overall when they played Josh Allen, when they played BYU, just whenever they played an NFL caliber quarterback, they've definitely struggled. It's a good thing to start the year with no Jordan Love, and they're usually pretty good in the blue. I'm not too concerned about this game. They opened up as 17-point favorites in Vegas. Thought it would be around 14, but 17 is definitely a large amount. I'm curious to see the quarterback situation though. Last year Hank Bachmeier was the starter as a true freshman, and this year they have Jack Sears who transferred in. Hank is still starting quarterback, but if he struggles at all, you could definitely see Sears in certain packages and definitely go with that.
Yeah, I think you just got to pay attention to both teams' quarterback situation, which is weird to say because I thought Hank played really well. I thought he made a lot of freshman mistakes last year. Hopefully this will be kind of like his leap year into the quarterback that we all think that he can be.
The second game of the season, they're away at Air Force, and I think this could actually be one of their hardest games of the year. Nick, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I know you think this is a really hard game. I'm kind of torn on this because I agree with you because traditionally Boise State has struggled with triple option teams, even the likes of New Mexico, right? Like they've even struggled when they've had really good defenses to contain triple option teams or option concepts.
Yeah, and obviously the goal is whenever you go into the game, the goal is to win. But I think this might be a tough one for Boise State, just especially at this time of year when it starts getting a little cold in Colorado. Things get tough against Air Force, and they're used to it out there, and just I don't see a lot of confidence going into that game. However, I do think if Boise State wins, it's going to be a blowout. But if they lose, it's going to be a really close loss and could come down to the last possession.
So the next game, I think for both me and you, we're recognizing that the second week of October and BYU has a bye week, play Western Kentucky, and then I think they play Boise State. So the likelihood of them coming into this game is going to be 6-0, is going to be extremely high, and they're ranked 12 right now, with the ability to move up even further because of other Big 12 teams and SEC/Big 10 teams that'll fall.
Absolutely.
So what do you think this game means for Boise State?
Whenever you have our top 25, let alone top 15, top 10 opponent come onto the blue, it's always a huge game. And especially now it's kind of weird because normally you have a packed house and a lot of momentum going on the blue. Keep in mind, Boise State has drawn the most false starts in the nation out of all teams in the past 2 years. And that's a typical big home field advantage. And without fans, that might be a little bit tough. But anytime a ranked opponent comes on, it's a big game. And especially with BYU, they're just about Boise State's biggest rival in the last couple of years at least, let alone about a 7-year stretch, besides maybe a couple against Fresno State, where they played back-to-back years in the Mountain West Championship. Even though BYU isn't in the Mountain West, I'd say they're definitely Boise State's biggest rival, and Boise's going to want to get revenge, especially this year after losing in Provo and essentially losing their undefeated season last year.
Yeah, if you think about it from group of five standpoint too, right? BYU right now is, besides Cincinnati, is like the front runner for the group of five representation. Yep. How sweet would it be if Boise State comes in and knocks them off at home? That would be huge for group of five, but also just rivalry standings. I think that just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and especially with UCF and Memphis both having a loss, at least on their record, if Boise State beats BYU, they have a pretty easy schedule going along after that, which we'll jump into right here. following that home game against BYU, they have a Thursday game against Colorado State, and Colorado State has never beaten Boise State. They're 0-9. And I mean, Nick, do you think they're going to struggle against Colorado State this year?
So I would say this is a pretty safe game, even though let's say, they beat BYU. You can lose this game really easy if you don't get your head back on as soon as you can and get ready for the game on Thursday.
Following that game, they traveled to the island at Hawaii. And Nick, thoughts?
So I don't know about you. I kind of want to hear your thoughts about this one. Is Hawaii's always tough because it's a hell of a road game, right? Like you're totally different time zone, such a long flight. It's at this time of year, it's going to be a massive climate change. So the only thing other than that you don't really have to worry about is there is going to be a new quarterback, and this will only be like his 4th game. But what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned the quarterback. Cole McDonald led Hawaii to a Mountain West championship appearance last year where Boise State beat them, but he was partially the reason that they really did how they did. So their success is not going to be as big this year, and I think they're going to have a significant drop-off. It's always tough going out there, but overall, I think they'll definitely get it done, whether it's scrappy game or a blowout.
This one, we both agree that they're going to win. It's home versus San Jose State. San Jose State has never performed well at Boise, but San Jose State is a team that I think is on the rise, particularly what they did last year, keeping games close against Air Force, Boise State, and then Utah State. I think they're on the rise, especially with a returning quarterback, but it is home in Boise. It's late in the year. I wouldn't worry about it. I do think that it has the potential to be a shootout or a potential to be a really close game, but I still think that Boise State will win. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, I was super shocked last year to see how San Jose State played against Boise, because it was a very close game and it came down to the last couple of possessions. But this year I'm not too concerned. It's a home game, especially if they do get out of those Air Force and BYU games. I don't think then being undefeated are going to drop that game specifically. However, San Jose State might want to spoil their season by coming onto the blue and do that. So I would say they'll win this one, but like you said, they are on the rise, and they've gotten significantly better over the years. I think the next game at UNLV is also a little bit one to keep an eye out.
They went into UNLV last year and won pretty handily, and that was like Hank's coming out party, throwing at least. John Hightower had 2 massive touchdowns that game, I think, if I remember correctly. I think we both agree that UNLV will just be a win.
Following UNLV, going into Wyoming, I don't look at this as an easy game, because even though Boise is going to be cold at that time, Wyoming's going to be a lot colder, considering they have the highest elevation out of any stadium in the NCAA. Especially if Wyoming spoiled Boise season 2 or 3 seasons ago with Josh Allen, and that was heartbreaking. So going into Wyoming late in the year is always a really tough game. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Nick?
I mean, so that's the thing that you got to think about, right? So normally in December, you're in bowl season. If Boise State with whatever. So they've been in Vegas a few years, right? So they've been in warm, temperate climates in December. You're going to be in Wyoming in mid to late December. That's going to be freezing. And it's just going to be a tough game. Wyoming last year was a monster of a game. It was an overtime field goal win. I think it's going to be tough. It just straight up will just be a hard game. I don't think anything besides the UNLV game and possibly Colorado State are going to be super easy.
And yeah, so I mean, overall, I think Nick and I both have different schedule predictions. But so my prediction is going to be final record of 7-1 with a loss to Air Force. I think that loss could go either way. I think they could go loss to Air Force or BYU. But I think them being with a home game against BYU, I think that could definitely change things. But 7-1. It's a very top-heavy schedule, though. If they go 3-0 to start the year, I think they will go undefeated. Nick, what's your prediction?
So I'm going to say 7-1 as well, but I think, as much as I hate to say this, I think the loss is going to come to BYU, only because BYU has been playing since legit week 1. I'm not saying that Boise State has to peak by week 3 in order to beat them, because I do think that Boise State still has a better team. But BYU has played really, really well, and their offense looks really, really good. I just think that you need to be careful, but I think we're both expecting them to be in a Mountain West championship scenario, right? Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Nick Hall Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you subscribe, whether that's through YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter, to make sure that I can understand what you guys want to talk about for our next podcast episode. Please make sure that you subscribe, and thank you for listening to this episode.